Good morning to all those that already have joined us today. We've got about 180 people on call and climbing quite quickly. Please let us know where you're from, how you're doing today, how's the weather in your part of the world. We'll kick off shortly after 10 o'clock. My name is Luanda, for those that don't know me, but I'll do full introductions once we kick off the session in about 2 minutes or so. But let us know where you're from, put in the chat or the Q&A, whichever function is working on your side, and then we will engage with you on that platform. Morning, Zahir. Good morning, Anne. Welcome to the session. How's it, Mark? Hope you're well. Good to hear sunny in Durban, Karen. Love to hear it. Welcome, Alicia from East London. Awesome. I'll give it a couple more minutes and then we'll kick off the session at about, just call it 3 minutes past 10. Cold and misty at the Val Dam. Hope it warms up for you. Great, we've got a good crowd trickling in. We've got over 300 on call. I think let's get the show on the road. So good morning once again and welcome to another episode of iTOOsday. Today I will be your host. My name is Luanda Twane. I am the cyber head for iTOO. And today we'll be talking about, that little thing called cyber and, what are the risks? How do we navigate? And we've got a very special guest on call for you today. His name is Dominic White. Dominic regularly speaks and trains offensive and defensive security skills to governments and private companies worldwide. He is the CTO at an 18-year-old South African-born information security consultancy specializing in penetration testing. He was previously a manager within the Security and Privacy Services Division of Deloitte and holds an MSc from Rhodes University in the topic of computer security. He's actively involved in the South African security research community and has served on the technical advisory board of several conferences. He engages in his own research and has previously published work at various prestigious international security conferences such as DEF CON, Hack in the Box, 44Con, DerbyCon, and more. Dominic, welcome.
Good morning, Luando. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you. I think we can kick off. We've got nearly 400 people on call. It is 4 minutes past 10, so the show is over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for making time to attend in the midst of all these public holidays. I'm sure many of your colleagues, many of your clients are away somewhere relaxing while you're nose on the grindstone after Very long weekend. So thanks for choosing to spend some time here. So what I want to talk to you today about is cybercrime. And I want to do a couple of things with it. So the one is to give you an idea of what I don't think we need to worry about. I think there's the press in particular, our worries drive these concerns about a bunch of things which aren't really showing up within cybercrime. They aren't real risks to South Africans, or they are, but they're very small risks and they may be overblown. I then want to give you an idea about what real cybercrime looks like, what we're seeing from on the ground in South Africa that's affecting South Africans, that's leading to real losses, the kind of stuff that it's worth insuring against. And I want to do it in a way that empowers you to understand what's going on. So the problem is every time somebody like me comes on with one of these things, is we mumble some gobbledygook and we say something and it doesn't look anything like the last time you heard somebody like me come on. And you're left disempowered because you're now wholly dependent on an expert to tell you what's happening. But when I show you the kind of attacks that are happening, you'll see these are things that you recognize. These are things that have happened to you, to your friends and family, and you have an ability to reason about them. So even though some of the techniques and tactics change, the kinds of things the criminals are trying to achieve don't. And you actually have a lot of innate wisdom about that you can use to reason about it. So I want to do that too, to try and give you an idea about what those cyber attacks look like and help you reason about it. And yes, okay, let me jump into sharing my slides here. Okay, there we go. Okay, so I presented this at the excellent unconference that iTOO organized in February. If you didn't attend this year, I'd highly recommend that you try and attend the next one. It was incredibly well organized and a lot of fun. So thank you for the introduction, Lwando. My name's Dominic White, and really cybercrime is what I do. It's my passion. It's my long passion. I work for a South African company that's been doing it for 25 years. I myself have been doing it for over 20 years, and this is what I do. This is what I live, eat, and breathe. So I hope I can bring some of that knowledge and insight over to you. If you want to get in touch, my details are at the bottom there, and I work for an organization called Orange Cyber Defense. We provide a bunch of specialist cybersecurity managed services. Okay, so our teams track the number of what we call cyber extortion events. You will know this as ransomware. And I want to talk a little bit about ransomware, and I'm going to describe this graph shortly, because it's so ever present in communications about cybercrime. People talk about cybercrime, they talk about ransomware. So the reason we call it cyber extortion is because it stopped being about deploying malware and encrypting files alone a long time ago. It's about gaining access to your data and then trying to extort you for some money in return for not releasing the data or returning the data to you. There's a variety of things they can do, or just not disclosing that you've been breached, or all of the above, because we've seen quite a lot of double extortion, in some cases triple extortion events, where they will come back or they'll resell the details onto another criminal group, or the criminal group will break apart and different criminal groups will form from it. So it turns out there's no honor amongst thieves. And so cyber extortion is a more general term. We abbreviate this to CyX, and you'll see that in the coming slides. Now, what are the ways we can track what's happening with cyber extortion over time is because of the public nature of it. My computer's just started doing something funny. Can you still hear me, Lwando?
Yes, I can hear you, Dominic.
Is my camera working?
Your camera is a bit blurred, but we can hear you.
Okay, not sure what's going on there. But I'll continue anyway. So we can track what the cyber criminals are doing because they publish what's happening with these things. So we can go to the leak sites and go what's happened and which organizations have been targeted in the last little while. And so we've been doing that since 2020. And this graph depicts two things. One is the total number of incidents. So that's the scale on the left. And what you can see is that Q1 2025 has been a bumper quarter with nearly 1,400 people extorted in the last 3 months. And then the orange line is the number of groups, so the number of independent cyber extortion groups. And when you look at this graph overall, what you see is that there's an increasing trend of cyber extortion. Funny enough, when I presented this at the conference, I only had the stats up to Q3 last year. And there you can see a declining trend. So we thought, this is looking good. Things are going down. Of course, Q4 and Q1 of this year have led to an increase. So cyber extortion is not going away. This is prevalent around the world, and it's a real problem. If any of you or any of your clients have been unfortunate to be on the receiving end of this, it can really ruin your day, to put it lightly. But when we zoom into these stats and break it up by regions, things start looking very different. So on the far left, you can see the US and Canada dominate. And part of this is because of the relative sizes of our economies. You'll see the next one is Europe. We've got United Kingdom. If we're going purely by economies, China is a notable missing group there. But when you look at Africa, you see 57 and 70 all the way down on the right there. If I make it bigger, maybe it'll help you spot it. It can get lost in the noise. And if you think about the entire continent of Africa, if we've actually had a decrease from 70 incidents down to 57 incidents. That's not a lot of incidents. And in fact, when we zoom into South Africa, which again is all the way on the bottom right over there, you'll see there was only 23 incidents tracked in 2024 for us. And really continuing with the zooming in here. And importantly, with the zoom in, this is now excluding USA, Canada, and the UK, just so that we show up on the graph. And then if we zoom in even more, what you'll see in South Africa is that we're sitting at 25, 26 for the updated stats, and then we've only had 2 at the start of this year. So it's definitely increased. We had a doubling in 2023. But if you estimate around 100,000 to 110,000 organizations that are likely to be ransomware in South Africa, so I'm obviously excluding the informal sector, or spaza shops, or very small organizations, mom and pop shops, then we're talking about a fraction of a percentage here, 0.025% of organizations in South Africa are being ransomware. Now, I'm not in insurance, but if you were an actuary, this is probably something pretty good to insure against. You're going to get a lot more people not falling victims here and willing to pay for it because of how present it is in people's minds. But it's not really the risk it's made out to be. Now, each one of those 26 incidents can be devastating for the organizations impacted. Not devastating enough to end the organization, but it can have significant financial losses, significant impact on continuing operations, and a significant impact on trust for the organization. So I'm not taking away from how impactful those 26 were. And this isn't also the perfect data. There's some people who were ransomed and possibly paid the ransom before it went public, who aren't shown up in these lists. But within the greater scheme of things, this is not the most pressing cyber risk affecting those in South Africa. In fact, if this was, we would actually be doing quite well. Our cybercrime losses would be very low with that level of impact. So when people talk about cybercrime and they talk about ransomware, ransomware is not the most worrying thing, particularly in South Africa. Okay, the other thing people talk about all the time are deep fakes. So I want to give you an example of something. So this was an announcement Justin made. Can you hear the sound?
No, we can't hear the sound.
No, I can't hear the sound. Yes, I forgot to share the sound. Silly me. So what I did here is I made a deep fake of Justin. And in it, I made him declare that iTOO was now bankrupt and he was going to sell it all for a burger stand, which is obviously ridiculous. But when you listen to it, if you know Justin, then it doesn't sound very much like Justin. And so the thing with deepfakes that I've experienced when I try and actually do these things is that deepfakes are very hard to pull off. In South Africa, even more so. So in South Africa, deepfakes do 2 things. They make black South Africans sound like Arabs, and they make white South Africans sound like Australians. The voice models are not well trained on the nuance of a South African accent. So it's quite difficult to get a South African accent quite right. The other thing about deepfakes is if you're doing a deepfake, the advantage, if you get it right, is that you can trick somebody who's familiar with the person you are deepfaking. Now, what that means is if they're familiar with Justin, if you know Justin, and you hear a deepfake that doesn't sound like him, well, then that's not going to work very well because it'll be obvious it's not him. If you're targeting somebody who doesn't know Justin, well, then you don't need to sound like Justin. Then you can sound like me, and I'll just say my name is Justin. So if you are a con man or a con person who's engaging in the kind of confidence tricks that these days are increasingly cyber enabled, but at its core are just con tricks, and you're using a deep fake, it's not necessarily going to help you as much as people think. The people who are on the front lines of deepfakes are the recruiters, interestingly. And they've learned some very simple tricks. They ask people, put their hand in front of their face, and you can start to see the difficulty where it can't track someone's face. So you can see I am, in fact, not a deepfake on my side. So deepfakes are quite difficult to get right. And they aren't as damaging as people make them out to be. I think there's something we need to keep an eye on. These things are getting better over time. But right now, and for the last year plus, they haven't been as big a worry. When you do see news articles about people using deepfakes, oh, there was a fake boardroom, things like that, the question you need to ask in your head is, if they had used real people who just pretended to be someone else, would they have been more successful or as successful? There was a story of somebody in France who thought they were talking to Brad Pitt, sending pictures of people in hospital. And people look at those pictures and go, that's ridiculous. How could you think that was Brad Pitt? And the reminder there is these were con men engaging in confidence tricks. So deepfakes aren't the existential worry that people worry about. That said, they're really easy to pull off. So if you go to something like 11labs.io, they've got an instant voice cloner. It costs you about $5 to do this. You can upload some video or some audio that you have of someone, and you can clone it instantly. So while they're not very effective, they're very easy to do. And sites like this are the ones that you can use to keep track on how effective these are. Okay, so these two things that I've spoken about are what I like to call the falling pianos problem. And I think cybersecurity has this falling pianos problem. And maybe this is a useful analogy, or there's better analogies in the insurance industry. So the falling pianos problem is based on a story I like to tell. That imagine you had to go and meet somebody to make an exchange in a bad part of town, late at night. And your greatest worry, your singular concern, was that a piano might fall on your head. What you would be doing is misunderstanding the risks. And if you then had to posit some defenses that you could use to make things safer, you're going to invest in the wrong defenses. You know, if you put on a hard hat and check whether there's a piano factory nearby, those aren't the kinds of things you need to do to defend yourself in that kind of situation. So the falling pianos problems talks about that in cybersecurity, we're really bad at understanding what the real risks are. But most of you are pretty good at understanding risks when it comes to your personal security and safety. I mean, on the one hand, we're all South Africans, but we've also got years of evolution that have taught us to be able to defend ourselves. So if you're meeting somebody in a bad neighborhood late at night to do an exchange, there's a couple of reasonable things you could do. You could arrange the exchange to happen during the day. You could arrange for it to happen in a better part, a safer part of town. You could take a bodyguard with you. You could take a stab-proof vest. Those are all reasonable defenses against likely attacks, rather than worrying about the falling piano. So I think things like ransomware, things like deepfakes, these are the falling piano problems. They're very impactful, they make a lot of noise, they make good news articles, but they aren't necessarily a real description of the risks from a cybersecurity point of view that we're facing. These are the real risks we're facing from a cybersecurity point of view in South Africa. I'm sure many of you recognize this here. This is the courier guy scam. I think as South Africans, we get about one of these a week. It's completely fake if you weren't aware. What they do is they prey on the fact that you might be expecting a parcel, because so many of us do online shopping these days, and we are expecting parcels. And with all the Trump tariff nonsense, you never know if there's something being held up at a border somewhere, and maybe you need to pay something to get it unblocked. So when these things come in, particularly when you're busy and you're distracted and rushed, it could be quite easy to fall for it. If you have seen one of these before, you'll know it takes you to a page that looks like this, looks like a courier guy payment page. When you look at the URL at the top, you know, every phishing training thing will teach you that that looks like an absolutely ridiculous URL that shouldn't be trusted. But the rest of the page looks good enough. And if you were expecting a parcel, then maybe you'd click through. And then if you do click through, then ask your credit card details. And what it does is it posts these to a Telegram bot into a Telegram channel. And then the attacker has your credit card details and can go and spend money on it. It's a very simple scam. They pump these out over mass SMSs, and they hope that they can get some fraction of it. It's opportunistic. If they send out 500,000 SMSs and 10 people click on it and they get 10 credit cards they can defraud, then those numbers work for them. Not sure how many people actually look at these things or actually fall for these things, but the fact that they keep doing it tells me that it's obviously successful. And the thing that you can do with these things is to be a white blood cell. So you don't have to be a victim, unempowered, unable to do anything about it. What I mean by the analogy of being a white blood cell is white blood cells learn what pathogens look like in the body and then are able to fight them. So now that you know that that's a phishing scam and you see that's a phishing scam, instead of being irritated when you receive it, you can do something about it. So here's an example of something you can do about it. This is Phishing Initiative. It's a site run by my company. And so I know the people behind it, and I know that they get things done. You can report the phishing scam here. And what we will do is we will blacklist that site with the various browsers. So if you're using Microsoft Edge or Google Chrome or Safari or whatever your browser is, you'll get a big red label that says, warning, this is a phishing page, don't click on here. The sooner you report this, the sooner those kind of activities can be taken and that thing can be shut down. And so that's why if you were to go to that web page that's listed at the top there, you'll see that the site is no longer up because I reported it there and the team took it down shortly afterwards. So we're not powerless. There are things we can do. Now, that's not an exciting cybercrime scam. You know, when people want to know about cybercrime, they go, show me some magic hacking tricks and things like that. Instead, a lot of the time, it looks like this. It's kind of obvious. It's just relying on people to fall for things. It's opportunistic. It's a game of numbers, and it's increasingly predominantly affecting end users, normal people like you and me. And that's why I think you have an ability to reason about these things, which you maybe weren't aware of. Okay, so I want to give you 3 examples of cyber attacks. I'm going to take you through them, things affecting South Africa. And I want you to laugh at them. I want you to see them as ridiculous as I see them. You know, if you actually understand what they're doing on the other side, you realize that this is not that clever. This is actually quite silly. But they're very effective. They're making millions and millions of rands to fund cyber criminals. So this is my agenda slide. These are the 3 cyber attacks I want to go through. And these are the attackers looking as ridiculous as you're going to see. The other thing I want to do is I want to explain each attack as 3 phases: the initiation, elevation, and monetization. And I'll explain what each of these phases are and how they relate to the cyber attack. And the reason I want to do this is to give you that ability I mentioned at the beginning to try and reason about these things yourself. Because some of the phases will change, some of them don't. But if you understand what an attacker is trying to do, it can help you understand whether something you haven't seen before is an attack and what you could do about it. So with these 3 phases, initiation is they start the attack. This is the start of the attack. It's their initial approach. Once they start the attack, what they're hoping to do is get something out of you. Could be credit card details, like we saw in that last example. It could be user account details to your email. It could be access to a device of yours. They're trying to get some level of access to your services or your devices they didn't have beforehand. And then they want to use that access to get money, to steal money from you, because that is the vast motivation in the majority of cybercrime cases, is monetization. We like to imagine that there's all sorts of espionage cases, that we are the target of huge criminal forces, but truthfully, we're not that interesting most of the time. I mean, there are absolutely situations where private investigators might use cyber-enabled methods to go after someone, but those are very rare situations and they're very personal. You might have an understanding of what we call your threat model. So if you're in that situation, then take the appropriate steps. But most South Africans, most of the time, the kind of people you're insuring are going to be suffering the kind of attacks we're going to go through. So of these 3 phases, initiation, elevation, monetization. Monetization doesn't change a lot. At the end of the day, they're trying to get some money out of some bank accounts a lot of the time, or maybe Uber Eats or something like that. That doesn't change too much. The initiation can change quite a lot. One day it's over email. These days it's over SMS. It might be over LinkedIn. In the future, maybe that stuff's coming over TikTok or some social network we haven't even heard of yet. The elevation stage changes a little based on how our technology is set up and works, but the monetization stage doesn't change too much. Okay, so let's go into the first example here. So this is a Google document email purporting to come from SARS, sharing a document about provisional tax payment. We know our provisional tax payment was earlier in the year, and I'm sure some of you got that. Now, when you look at this email, and it's quite funny, people will say, but it's so obviously a phishing email. But the only difference between this email and a legitimate Google file sharing email is a single dot has been replaced with a dash. So over here where it says shares DM no reply -google.com, this is a malicious domain. It's not real. The real Google domain is shares DM no reply.google.com. So sometimes the tech companies themselves create things which look like phishing emails. I think there's some parts of this which are unbelievable. It's unlikely SARS is going to be sharing a Google document with you. But again, they're relying on stress and time. Provisional tax payment can be a stressful time. If you're in the middle of all of that and you get this email last minute, maybe late at night, then maybe you're going to look at it in a semi-panicked state and try and do some things here. Okay, so when you click to open this document, this was a real phishing site. It could take you to something that looks like this. Very helpfully lets you log in with all sorts of things there. Your Office 365 Microsoft details, maybe your Gmail details, maybe something like AOL or Yahoo. And you can see it's being hosted on our malicious domain here. So we're going to sign in with our Gmail credentials. And this is where we get to the elevation stage. So up to here, we were at initiation. This is the approach. Now they're trying to get credentials from you to log into your Google account. So what they do is they put up a phishing page that looks like Google sign-in. Very obvious, very straightforward. And you can see once again at the top, we're relying on the single dash rather than a dot for the login page. Now, maybe somebody falls for it. They put in their email username and password. And then the attacker has their email username and password and can log in as them. Okay, but you say, I am security conscious. I've enabled two-factor authentication. So what that means is I've got an application on my phone that gives me a one-time PIN that I can put in, or maybe a texts it to my phone or sends it to my email, and then I put that code in. Well, all the attackers need do, given that they've tricked you into thinking that this is Google, is when you get the text message with your verification code, they just prompt and ask for that code. And so you'll put it in, and now they have enough details to log in as you. Now, 2FA, this doesn't mean two-factor authentication is useless, but what it means is the attacker is limited in their timing. They have to use these credentials immediately and go and log into your account. But as you'll know, if you're a Gmail user, once you log in, you stay logged in. It doesn't log you out every hour or something like that, with maybe some of our corporate accounts do. Okay, so at this point, the attacker has access to your inbox. Now, what do? What's the monetization option of having access to your inbox? So the most common attack is something called business email compromise. Very unimaginative name. They've compromised your email and they're looking for business information. So here's an example of what they do. Is they look for something related to financial advisor or insurance advisor or home loans or payment. They'll make this search, and there might be some things there that gives you some information. And they'll set up a rule on your inbox that will forward everything that matches relevant payment information to another mailbox that they control. You can imagine this is a crime of opportunity. So if they have several thousand mailboxes that they're monitoring, they can't manually log into each one of these and try and figure out what to do. They're looking for something interesting. They get an alert by one of those emails coming through, and then they need to act quickly. So now in this instance, evil@yahoo.co.uk is the one that gets the mailbox where stuff gets forwarded to. And this particular customer is a client of PSG. I'm just using PSG as an example. They've done nothing wrong. They haven't been hacked. I'm not implying there's any security problems there. It's just a South African company that we know. All right. So the criminal gets an alert that an email has come in, and this is what the legitimate email looks like. So in this case, it's from John R. Broker. You can tell very real email because R stands for real, and he's a wealth manager at PSG, and there's all of his details. So the attacker sees a notification for this, goes into the mailbox, and edits the email. Now, the attacker is not going to change their name to fake broker, but I wanted to make a point. So this is now the modified email. And you'll see that the attacker modified the cell phone number because you can't trust anything that goes through a compromised channel. If you had phoned the cell phone number to verify payment details to check whether this is valid, you could get one of the attacker themselves or one of the attacker's colleagues who will vouch for John Fake Broker. So any validation you do has to come from outside a potentially compromised channel. Maybe look it up separately on a website, if you've got the number stored, phone them directly that way. And that might seem obvious, but what people really forget that is with this kind of information, with the stamped bank statements. So this is the original proof of bank statement here for transferring the money into, and this is the modified one. Can you tell the difference? The only thing that's changed here is the bank account number. And it's very easy to make the bank account number look like a scan. Instead of it being black text, it's gray text. You've got to match it to the others, use the same font, all of those sorts of things. So people a lot of the time will think this proof of bank statement now proves that this is a legitimate bank account number. But again, it has come through the compromised channel, so it cannot be trusted. What we see the real attackers doing a lot of the time is even when there isn't a proof of bank, they add their own fake proof of bank to try and add some legitimacy. So what the attacker has done is they've modified the bank account details for an investment that needs to be paid. So now the payment will be made to the attacker's bank account instead of PSG's bank account, and the attacker can run off with the money. This called business email compromise. They do this when you're purchasing cars, when you're purchasing houses. We had an incident recently with a customer that was buying farm equipment. The customer's account was compromised, not the company that was selling the farm equipment. And so they paid it into the attacker's account. But because they moved quickly, the bank was able to block the transaction, and they were able to recover a bunch of the funds. So that's the other side of things that you can do here. If there's a significant amount of money, you can get the bank to block access to those funds until things are sorted out and prevented from being lost. And so this is how they would monetize access to your inbox. This is the most prevalent cyber fraud in the world in terms of losses. So the most money is lost world over to this kind of cybercrime, business email compromise. And one of the reasons it makes this so deadly is because once they've compromised an email account, they can then mail all of the people who are friends or interact with that person and send the same file share or something else to try and get them to open a file. So now they have trusted access to somebody else. You can imagine if you get an email from one of your friends, you're going to trust it more than an email from a potentially random phishing address. And if it says one of your friends that you know is trying to share a Google document with you, you might be more inclined to then put your details in there. So there's a virality aspect to this that allows them to spread it, particularly across organizations. Okay, so that was the one attack. I covered that one first because it's one of the most prevalent. Let's look at the second one. And this is something that South Africans should recognize. We're talking about phone snatching. So you're on your phone, you're talking, somebody grabs the phone, runs off with it. You're walking, you're texting, somebody snatches it out your hand. You're at a restaurant, somebody pulls it off the table. You're outside a shop, somebody grabs it there. Phone snatching, very prevalent in South Africa. This is the initiation of the attack. Now, the belief a lot of people have is that when they snatch your phone, they're looking for the value of the phone. They're going to resell the phone onto someone else. And while that is one way to monetize that, that's not why they're doing this. The most common reason they're snatching your phone is to use it to gain access to accounts so that they can steal money from you. So what happens is after they've stolen your phone, they need to get into your phone. Now, the reason many of these snatchings happen while people are using their devices is because the device will be unlocked. And if the device is unlocked, then it's easier for them to gain access to things. If the device is locked, however, or even if they manage to grab it unlocked, they still want to try and get the PIN code. Maybe you've got an obvious PIN code 000 or 1234 or one of the patterns, but they only have 2 or 3 attempts to try those. So what they do is they take advantage, again, of a stressful situation. They look at your emergency contacts or any other contact information they might be able to get out of the device, and they send a message to your spouse, to a friend, to a family member, pretending to be Google or pretending to be Apple, saying, we've located your phone, do you want to lock it? So it looks like these Find My services that they have. So this is, again, a real example from a victim. She was mugged. She had her phone taken. And when we followed up to try and figure out what happened, how did they get the details, we saw that they'd sent her husband this SMS. And you can imagine, stressful situation, you get a call from your wife saying, look, she's just been mugged, she's had her phone stolen, please go and enable Find My iPhone and wipe it, something like that. You do that, and then you get this text message. You're expecting it. When you open that, it has your wife's name on there. It looks like, if you're in a trusting marriage, you would maybe know the PIN code to your wife's device. You're familiar with this view of things. So you type it in. It then takes you to something which looks like this. This is when they figured out something was up. Why was it blurry? Why wasn't it resolving? Why wasn't it showing a location they could actually look at? And this is, of course, a fake page. They put this up here to just buy some time and make you think that it's done something. But what you've actually done is you've given the PIN code over to an attacker. So that's how they elevate. They had your device. That was the initiation, was stealing the device. But the elevation was to gain that PIN code. All right, so now how will they monetize that with access to your device? The most obvious thing is to log into your bank account. The problem there is that the problem for the criminals is that most of the bank accounts use biometrics. If you've got a modern device and you've got to work with a modern bank, it's going to use your Face ID, it's going to use a fingerprint, something like that, and they don't have access to that. But many of those things can fall back to PIN code. If you're using Face ID, you remember the days of COVID when you were wearing a mask, Face ID didn't work very reliably, and it would always ask you for your PIN code instead after the 3rd attempt of failure. Many of the banks prevent that. But the other thing they can do is, instead of opening up your banking application, they open up your web browser. And many people save their usernames and passwords for their bank in their web browser's password memory, password storage. And because they have your PIN number, they can gain access to that, and then they can log into your bank account that way. So they're logging into the website, even though it's on your mobile phone. And then they can happily transfer money because they have access to your phone. So any SMSs that come in, they get their OTPs, away they go. They can also look at other applications. And what you'll see rounds of monetization. So they obviously go after your bank first. Then they might go after crypto accounts, things like Luna or Binance, to see if they can transfer money that way. When they really start plumbing the depths is they love Uber Eats in particular. You'll see a lot of Uber Eats stuff coming off quite quickly. We're still not sure whether they're legitimately buying food or if there's some collusion with a restaurant. It could be both in some situations. Sometimes we see strange things happening. I know one victim had a situation where Ubers kept rocking up at their house. They were doing these fraudulent payments, but the Ubers, so we don't think the Uber drivers were in on it. I'm not sure how they were getting the money out. The reason I mention that is you don't need to be a criminal yourself. They're trying to get money. If they've had access to a device, you can imagine the kinds of things they have access to and what they're trying to do, and then figure it out from there, that they're losing things. So the action you need to take when you get your phone lost is phone your bank, get your bank accounts locked down as soon as possible. Phone your cellular provider, get your SIM swapped away from there as soon as possible. Warn people. A lot of the time, people don't want to tell people they've been hacked because it's embarrassing. In a business context, it can be damaging. But the problem is then one of your friends receives an email from the attacker, from your compromised account, and the attack continues. Whereas if you'd warned them, it wouldn't necessarily have happened. Similarly, the attackers have access to your WhatsApp. We've seen silly attacks where they message people saying, hello, it's me, I'm trapped on the side of the road, desperate, without money, please will you send me some money, things like that. At least they know that if any of those things come up, to not worry about it. But if they have access to your device, they have access to your whole life, all your social media networks, all sorts of things. And if there's a way, that, as stupid as it would be to message somebody and say, I'm stuck on the side of the road, if there's a way to monetize it, they will do it. So shut all those things down and do it in order of where the biggest risk is. Where do you stand to incur the most losses? Maybe you're an active day trader and you've got an app on your phone, and that's the thing you need to shut down first. Okay, then the last attack I wanted to show you is, it's not as prevalent yet. It started around June last year in South Africa, and we've seen low hundreds numbers of victims, with a big give or take on that. And there's not perfect insight here as to what's happening. But this attack's interesting as where attacks might go and how security controls, things that are supposed to stop these things from happening, get ignored when people are, when they think there's some reward in it. Okay, so the first part of this attack is you will first experience this attack if you were being targeted or opportunistically targeted through a Facebook advert. So in this case, it's a Facebook advert for Ethiopian Airlines, a special on Ethiopian Airlines. You can see it's from an account called Liam Olivia. That was a hacked Facebook account. So somehow maybe they got it through a stolen device, or maybe they got it through BEC fraud, where they could reset the password to gain access to the Facebook account. Maybe they directly targeted them on Facebook, but they have access to someone's Facebook account and they use it to launch Facebook ads, malicious Facebook ads. Now, this Facebook ad looks too good to be true. 90% off an Ethiopian Airlines flight. And maybe you were planning a trip for this period and you see that and you go, well, that's an amazing deal. Let's look into that. If you interact with that, you see it says, click the link to add WhatsApp to receive it for free. When you get to WhatsApp, they interact with you this way. They have a call with you, and then they give you a URL where you can go download the app that you can use to take advantage of this special. And the reason they do that is because they don't want these URLs to be public. They don't want people like me or my colleagues to find these URLs and get them shut down. So they try and distribute it privately. When you go to that URL, this is what the legitimate South African Airways Google Play Store page looks like. And this is what the real criminals' fake page look like. You can see they're very similar. They're designed to look very similar if I switch between those two. So it's not easy to figure out that they're different. Okay, so you click here and you download this app, and it's actually malware. Now, there is a defense in place where by default on modern Android devices, you can't actually install malware from third-party sources to prevent this kind of attack. But what we see, particularly in South Africa, is most people have this turned off. And I actually blame an application called GB WhatsApp. Maybe some of you on this call have heard of it. What I find is that a lot of the time people haven't, but the majority of South Africans have. So what GB WhatsApp is, it's a hacked version of WhatsApp, non-malicious hacked, but that gives you extra functionality. So if a status that can't be saved, GB WhatsApp will let you see a status. It can show you details about the last time somebody was logged on that WhatsApp otherwise wouldn't show you and things like that. So people love GB WhatsApp. And it's not an official app, it's not a legal app, so people install it using third-party sources, which means they're more vulnerable to these kinds of things. So when you go to download this application, it looks something like this. It says the file might be harmful. Do you want to download it? Yes, you download it and install the application. Then what this application does is it uses accessibility services. So the things designed for people who have vision and sight problems to make interacting with their devices easier, to gain full access to what's happening on the screen and with the keyboard. And because that's so obviously a bad thing, if somebody has full access, full remote access to your device, Google gives you a big old warning about that. It says, are you sure you want this application to have full control of your phone? It takes over your entire screen with this big warning. And what's mind-boggling to me is that people click through this warning even. And it's because they can get some money off a flight, evidently. Then once you've done this, it shows you something like this. And in the meantime, in the background, they're gaining access to your bank accounts. They effectively have full access to your phone. They can also do things after hours while you're sleeping. those sorts of things. And the thing they go after a lot of the time is your bank accounts at this point. They've actually got things set up in the applications to monitor stuff happening in banking applications and to try and transfer money. Okay, so those were 3 attacks that are prevalent in South Africa, the real attacks, things that are actually happening. The business email compromise, not just South Africa, that's happening all over the world. The email, the SMS phishing scams, the courier guy stuff I showed you, that's very specific to South Africa, but that style of attack, again, happens all over the world. This malware campaign actually started in Southeast Asia, and they've recently moved to focusing on South Africa. So that real attacks that are actually happening in other parts of the world. So none of this is pure South African. I think the phone snatching, that is also happens in other parts of the world. But as South Africans, criminals seem to come after us first with some of these things. It's amusing to me to hear my US colleagues talk about SIM swaps, or European colleagues talk about SIM swaps. And I sort of say, we were born with SIM swaps. SIM swaps started with us almost 20 years ago, I think. So some of the phone snatching things seem to happen in South Africa more so than they happen in other parts of the world. And it might be this combination of people prepared to engage in physical snatching as well as enough sophistication to engage in the monetization. So I've gone through those to try and give you an idea about what real attacks look like in South Africa and to disabuse you of the notion that deepfakes and ransomware are the biggest cybercrime threats that you and your customers face in South Africa. If that's what people are worried about, they're worried about falling pianos. Those are the black swan events in some cases. And what we actually need to worry about is the latter. Now, risk is a thing where you need to worry about everything, right? We're talking about likelihoods and probabilities. What are the most likely things to happen is what we're talking about here. And then I also took you through these 3 stages. And I think now maybe this will make more sense. I was saying the monetization stage doesn't change a lot. They're going to gain access to your bank account and make transfers of money to money mules. The elevation stage changes a little based on how technology changes. If Google adds a new way to authenticate or updates their login page, then that'll change somewhat. The initiation phase changes quite often. That's when we talk about keeping up to date with cybercriminal methods. That's really the stage that changes most often. So in 2 years from now, when a new attack comes along and it uses a wildly different initiation, you should still be able to reason about this. Okay, the attack started. What were they trying to get access to? Was it the phone? Was it the accounts? And then what were they trying to do with that access to steal money at the end of the day? And because, much like in the falling pianos problem, you have an ability to reason about how you can stay safe in a dark alley late at night, I think you also have an ability to reason about how to stay safe from a cybersecurity perspective. And that this isn't as unknowable as people like us like to make it out to be. So on that note, thank you very much for your time and attention. We're going to do some questions now. There are my contact details if you want to talk more about this at all. Should I hand it over to you, Lil?
Fantastic. Thanks, Dominic. I hope the audience got some great insights out of that session. I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of ransomware not being the biggest challenge. If we look at i2 and what we see from a claims perspective, it's definitely not the number one from a notification perspective. It can be quite severe when it does happen. However, the frequency of that is relatively quite low compared to what you've really highlighted as being the real risk, which is around the business email compromise, those changing of those invoices, that access to compromised emails. That's really something that our clients and our brokers should be aware. There are some questions in the chat that I would like to address to you that hopefully you can help us with. The first one was around, you mentioned bank accounts being featured, and yet, the scammers are still getting away with the money. I think the guys were asking, maybe you might have some insights. How does the bank then FICA, or not be able to track that money if the accounts are then FICA'd by the banks? Do you have any insights around that?
Yeah, a little bit. So, criminals have money mules. So effectively, those are legitimate bank accounts from legitimate people. There's a variety of ways that they get access to money mules. Real examples in South Africa, a building site says, we'll only pay you into a bank account, give me all your ID books. They go and open a bunch of bank accounts and then somebody can operate them that way. Sometimes, you know, these ads you see on street polls saying work from home and make money, effectively the job, unbeknownst to the person, or maybe willfully ignorant from the person, is you receive an amount of money into your bank account, you need to transfer that money onto these other 5 bank accounts, and you get to keep some part of it. They're also trying to use the individual overseas allowance that people have so that they can move things cross-border as well. So they utilize money mules. So that makes it hard to trace for 2 reasons. The one is it's split up over multiple bank accounts, which then gets split up over multiple others. So there's this branching effect. And they're trying to get it a lot of the time out of the country. And then at some point within that chain, it'll probably get turned into cash and laundered. So that it's no longer in the banking system in a way that it can be retained. So the opportunity for action is at that original, the first account where you make the transfer, or the singular transfer is made. If you can freeze the funds there, that's when you can get it back.
Awesome. Another question came from the audience saying that the phishing sites, they noticed that they're using HTTPS. They thought that HTTPS would indicate a secure site. Can you have any comments around that?
So what HTTPS does is it's secure in only one very narrow way. It means between your browser and the website, there is strong encryption, meaning people can't tamper with it and interfere with it. Now, if I go to nedbank.co.za and it's SSL'd, then that certificate will prove that nedbank.co.za belongs to Nedbank. But I never look at that certificate. You never look at that certificate. What we do is rely on the fact that nedbank.co.za in the browser belongs to Nedbank, and the certificate attests to that. But if I go to nodbank.co.za, there will be a different certificate, which will make sure I'm talking securely to potentially a fake site. And the certificate will attest that Nodbank is owned by whoever, but it doesn't matter because you don't check that certificate anyway. So it's only talking about the security of the communications. It's not, you know, you didn't go to the Google Play Store, you went to the attacker's website. So the SSL means you're talking securely to the attacker's website than the Google Play Store, which is why they keep telling you check the URL at the top.
Fantastic. Biometric access, how safe is that for our banking apps and cell phones?
For all intents and purposes, it's safe. There's all sorts of nuance with biometrics and how it works. We don't see a whole, you know, the attackers, these kinds of attackers aren't engaging in biometric bypass. If, you know, technically there's a way that you can, one of my colleagues, I'll give you an example because I think this is a fun example. He had to bypass biometrics for a financial services application, and they were using cameras to look at the structure of your face and to, so what he did is he printed a buff with his picture on, and then he got a mannequin and he put the buff over the mannequin because then it would look like him. It still didn't work. So it turns out they were also looking at heat. So the mannequin is cold, but a human face is hot. But they were using commercial cameras. They don't have special infrared. There's a little bit of infrared that cameras can pick up. So what he did is he used a hairdryer and warmed the thing up, and then he was able to bypass this biometric that people had put in place. Now, that's not a common biometric. It was one specific place. So there are interesting attacks that can be done based on how the biometric is being done. But it's still easier for them to phish you, to say, hey, what's your PIN code? Because I'm fine mine. Take advantage of stressful situations or create stressful situations a lot of the time. And then, I mean, you know, if you've got a high-end device, then the biometric is really good. If you've got a 10-year-old or 20-year-old laptop, you know, remember with those little strip fingerprint readers that you rub your finger, that's not very good. Easier to bypass. So there's big variances in it. But for all intents and purposes, on a standard, modern, up-to-date device, the biometric's good.
So guys, update your phones, your laptops. Please go and buy something new if you're still dealing with a 20-year-old laptop. Biometric is still safe for now.
Question tell me where you got a 20-year-old laptop from that's still working. I
mean, my 10-year-old has completely just died, so I don't know about 20-year-old.
Yeah.
Tell me about you know, catching the threat actors. Is it possible? Does it happen often? Do you have any experience around that?
It's absolutely possible. Go Google Hush Puppy arrested in Cape Town. Go Google Black Axe syndicate members arrested in South Africa. Absolutely possible. As South Africans, we focus so much on crime, but for some reason we don't highlight the good news when the criminals are caught. So the nature of this crime is that there's lots of little losses, which then bubble up to crime kingpins somewhere. So law enforcement needs to have associated multiple crimes to one threat actor for there to be enough of a justification to go after that threat actor. But that's difficult. There was 100,000 last year, 10,000 last year, 20,000 last year. If those are all to different people, then there's not enough for the hawks to get involved, let's say. But if we go, look, 5 million, 10 million, 20 million, 30, 100 million collective losses are attributed to this threat actor, then the hawks have a clear mandate to go after that person. So there's a lot of legwork law enforcement does. That legwork is being done. There are small dedicated groups in law enforcement and working with law enforcement that go after these things, because increasingly cybercrime is linked to crime. The groups doing cybercrime are not necessarily just unique cybercrime groups. They are wider criminal groups that engage in other kinds of crime.
And that's 100% true. I think with cybercrime being so lucrative and the success rate of catching the criminals still being so low, it is a different avenue if you are a syndicate of any kind that is looking to launder money, make money, whatever the case might be. I think that's all the questions we have from the group. Someone asked about MTN's breach recently, but we don't have information on that, unfortunately. So we can't chat on that breach. Dominic, maybe one last one from my side. In our world, we like to talk to our brokers and our clients, and we preach the synergy between risk management, the security side of things, as well as having the cyber insurance as just that last safety net when things do go wrong. What is your take on that marriage between the security, the risk management side of things, as well as then and potentially insured buying the cyber insurance policy just to help transfer that financial risk at the end of the day?
Yeah, certainly for our large commercial clients, cyber insurance is no longer a nice to have. It's increasingly required. We're not yet at the stage of ubiquity, and I think many of the people on the call know that better than I do, but it's a common boardroom conversation. It's absolutely relevant. When you talk about smaller enterprises, so when you're not looking at big enterprises, I mean, the kinds of numbers you were sharing with me, Lwanda, it's incredibly affordable and worth it. And then, maybe this is a bit cynical, but the fact that ransomware isn't very prevalent, but in people's minds is so prevalent, the insurance can be very affordable, and it can give them that peace of mind against a major incident. It's the kind of original idea behind insurance, that you're insuring against a black swan incident and helping people not have a business-ending event. And it's a prevalent worry in all of their minds, but it's not something where you're going to have a bankrupt insurer or prices are going to have to be so high because it's such a prevalent event. So it's kind of the ideal event to insure against.
Cool. I mean, we're seeing a lot of requests for clients, especially in the large corporate space, asking for that full ransom cover. So to your point, it's very prevalent in their minds that it could be a large risk for them, although the actual numbers don't necessarily speak to that risk at the moment. What we do see a lot of is the theft of funds, the email compromise side, and we do offer that coverage on all of our policies as standard, and can be requested for any of those that don't have it at the moment. So it is something that is available to assist when that does happen. I think there was a couple of queries that just came in now. The one user says they got a WhatsApp from a mate, not using the usual cell phone number, asking for them to vote for his ambassador course. He said it'd help and send him a pin. He blocked him, but what sort of scam might this have been?
I'm not sure what ambassador course is. I think there's two things. The one, it could be they're trying to gain access to your WhatsApp account. So if you have when you change the number that a WhatsApp account is associated with, you get sent a PIN number on your WhatsApp account, which you then need to use on the new number to transfer it. We see that quite often, those kind of scams. So potentially what could have been happening there is they were pretending to be your mate, whatever the cover for this ambassador course is. I'm not quite sure what that is, but the PIN number they're actually sending is your WhatsApp reset code number. If you'd given them that, they would have then taken over your WhatsApp number.
Yes, please be careful giving over those pins. Gotta double check if you're dealing with the right people. Did you request that pin, or is it just, a scam? Someone just saying out of the blue, please send me a pin because of this request that I had. It's really something that we do see that victims fall for, especially on the personal side. And we've got personal products that can also talk to your, to your family members, to your friends. We've seen quite a lot of victims fall for these scams and unfortunately lose quite large sums of money. Dominic, thank you very much. We've reached the top of the hour. Can I ask that we share your presentation? Is that possible?
Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. For all those that asked for the presentation, we shall do that post the session. Thank you for joining us. We had over 500 people on call. Fantastic turnout. Enjoy the rest of your day. And if you have any further questions around cyber insurance, cyber crime, please drop us a note at iToo, and we shall be in touch with you from there. Thanks once again for your time. And that brings us to the end of this iToosday. Dom, appreciate your time and your expertise as always.
Thanks, Lando, and yours.
Take care, everyone. Until next time.